Hello everyone, and welcome back to a brand new review of Class for tonight. And so, if you haven't watched Class episode 7 just yet, then please do watch it right now. And so, I know most people usually watch it around about 10 o'clock in the morning, but I usually watch it around about later in the evening time because it's much easier to film. And so, without all those, distracting light, conditions in the way. And so, I quite like to work in this kind of environment. But anyway, real show is that Class episode 7, what I thought of it was very different from any of the other stories from the other episodes that we've had in Class this year. This one was quite sudden for me. I mean, not to be not to be offensive towards this story, but just I didn't really think that this story was quite up to scratch as the other episode was, because the other one was more interactive because you knew what was going on. But then at the end of episode 6, you almost knew the ending towards episode 7, because episode 6 is just where Mrs. Quill comes into the room and then she has this thing on her eye, and then she just she's able to use the gun without her brain or her skull hurting that much. And I thought that was quite good as an ending. But when it came to the ending of episode 7, it was all as I knew what was going to happen in the end anyway, because Mrs. Quill was already going to be free. But then in this kind of in the middle episode, I think the most piece of action that we got, and also what understanding about the whole episode, was in the middle of the episode rather than the end and the finish. Well, the start and the finish, really. So yeah, it was quite of a sudden ending because we knew what was going to happen anyway. But from this episode, it was quite unusual. I mean, the head teacher was back again. I mean, I'm not a big fan of her character, and also the way that she introduced herself was in the start of the show was quite good. But then when she completely vanished, when she was leaving all the other from Balon and Mrs. Quill to do their thing to remove Dion, she just left so suddenly, and I thought that was almost like not a proper goodbye of how she would say that. But then she did the hologram stuff, and I thought that was quite sudden of her to have herself like a hologram. And yeah, I mean, I didn't like her at all. But I think the 2 star players were, if I could just show you, if you can see this person to your left here, him, he is just brilliant. I mean, I absolutely love his character. I think he was really a keen, player in this episode, where he almost knew what was going to happen, and he knew what quest they were on to find, but Mrs. Quill had no idea what they were on about. And then the head teacher was transporting them to, or teleporting them to distant dimensions to retrieve some artifacts that could help her to remove the arm from her skull, which has been killing her for so long, causing her to traumatize so much pain. And she just wanted this arm thingy removed from her skull as soon as possible, because it was just edging the way to her skull and just poisoning her mind. And so in this episode she does get it removed, but then there's a sudden consequence that comes at the end. And so yeah, I'm going to talk about the ending a bit later on, but most of the quests, or the quest that they go and search for all of the kind of things that they would needed to be required in order for the Balon to remove the arm safely, for Mrs. Quill to be painless. And so yeah, but no, it wasn't painless at all. It was painful. Much painful. When they did the operation, it was so bloody, so grievous, just to see the kind of hole in her in Mrs. Quill's eye, when basically all the blood and just all the kind of guts and all the inside of her eye just came out onto her face. It was just so disgusting. It was so horrible to watch it. I was absolutely horrified when I actually just saw the kind of gap in her eye, and just the whole operation was quite disgusting as well. I mean, I think the second place where they went to was basically a whole darkened cave, where I think it was the Balon's gun, where they had to retrieve some blood from his god, and then had to use it in order to push it back into Mrs. Quill's eye, and then what that blood kind of did, or what kind of that fragment of blood did, it kind of re-replicated her other eye, but left this kind of scar on her face. But at least as a soldier, a scar is nothing. With basically, if you're a soldier, you should have scars literally everywhere on your arms, shoulders, face. You should always have one, just to replicate yourself as to make yourself known as a soldier. If you didn't have that, I mean, that was a bit of a weird, having that eye, and probably to replicate that she's a soldier, and also Balan's a good soldier as well. I mean, he was quite of a unusual character at first. I mean, when they went to the kind of the haystack where they kind of had the barn with all the straw coming out or kind of setting, I mean, that was quite a good setting. But it was like the place where I think it was the Quill's place, where they kind of be born in the kind of nest, and then also die in the nest as well. But this was almost like the kind of the goddess of Miss Quill's whole species. And she didn't realize that this wasn't a real goddess of her Quill species, and just she kind of calmed the creature down. But then Balan went full throttle and started attacking that thing, kind of smashing its face, and then trying to remove the brain, because the brain was the essential part that Balan needed in order to remove the arm from Mrs. Quill's skull. And it was just quite, because I thought that Balan had no sense of humour, but also had no sense of, meaningless of other species. But then when Mrs. Quill and Balan had sat down and they started talking to each other, they both shared the same feelings, which I didn't think at first. I mean, potentially Balan, at first, I thought he was just a complete stranger, or just a guy who broke out of prison like many centuries ago, but then got recaptured. But no, he was an actual shapeshifter, and that put to me in mind that he's actually in fact a Zygon. He doesn't look like a Zygon. I think, as you know, as a Zygon looks like from Series 9, they all shapeshift into humans and just blend themselves into the natural surrounding. And so, yeah, they do live in harmony, as Balan said, with his niece. But we know that, basically, well, we knew that in the in the episode of how Balan used to be enslaved and used as a soldier, and had to kill for necessary means. Like, he didn't really mean to kill anybody, but he was just literally, as he said, he was starving. He couldn't find anywhere. They said they were a freak. He was a monster, and so he got quite rebellious and started to thrive as what he could find, because he didn't mean to kill, but it's just a necessary way of surviving. And so he just did that because there's no other way of meaning to survive. Instead of, if people call you freak or call you monster, then honestly, your instant reaction is just try to be rebellious. Instant word, but that's how he kind of coped with it. But that's almost like the same as Miss Quill, because Mrs. Quill, or Miss Quill, that's how you pronounce it, basically she kind of was enslaved as well by Charlie. Was the urn trying to causing her so much pain in her skull. But then also they do share the same feelings, and show the same kind of backgrounds of how they were entrapped, enslaved, and kind of frozen. And so, like, the same thing also happened with Miss Quill as well. Like, she was also frozen as well, which I felt that they kind of shared the same bonds and really built up a big relationship between them both in that episode. I thought that was quite great of both of them. And then when they got back to the school through like teleportation, I mean, that kind of device that the head teacher had was quite an unusual gadget. It was very unstable to use, and so they kind of like had this all purple kind of lightning, and then completely sucked them into like a vortex or something, and send them down to different dimensions to retrieve artifacts that could initially help Mrs. Quill's operation of removing the arm. And then, I mean, that was quite good. I mean, the quests were fast. I mean, I have to say, I mean, could the quest go on for quite a bit longer? I mean, that could add some depth and more character. I think that little segment where Mrs. Quill and Balan had a little talk together, I wish they could have had more, more, you know, emotional scenes together within like the first, you know, few minutes. But yeah, Balin was quite like the unknown character. He became quite aggressive to Mrs. Quill, but Mrs. Quill didn't, you know, wasn't fearful at all. It's like, oh, who are you? And so yeah, she kind of had like a, you know, persistent and very, you know, aggressive, you know, reaction towards him, and just like, oh yeah, I mean she's just kind of like that. But so yeah, the episode was quite of a sudden. I only just thought that the quest was just too fast. Basically, I think the second quest was just very fast. They didn't have a speak. They just basically got the thing and just went off to the next dimension. I think that was just a bit of a just unwanted points that I wanted to make. I mean, I'm honestly think that these class episodes are just brilliant, but I just think this one just kind of didn't really live up to my expertise, because I already knew what was going to be happening in the show, that Mrs. Quill was going to get the thing removed, because I knew from the episode 6 at the end, she fired a gun which didn't cause that trauma in her skull to go paranoid, and so that meant, does she have that thing out of her head once and for all? And like, she definitely did, and then she kind of used to like, oh, everything's going to change right now. I already knew that kind of ending, and also I knew the start as well, but then everything else in the beginning kind of built up to this kind of big suspense of doing that operation. I think the operation was quite the horrible moment of this whole episode. It was just very gruesome at all. And so yeah, that really got me thinking of like, oh, do Balin and Mrs. Quill have a good, you know, thing onto each other? And then they do have a little thing when they start, you know, having this romantic, you know, love. And now Miss Quill has finally got this thing out of her head, and like she's now able to love and lust for, like, you know, somebody in her life. But then when they move on and like suddenly they wake up, they suddenly realize this kind of sand. I mean, like, why? How did that sand even get into the you know, school like that? But then when they looked out and you know, opened the door, they kind of see themselves like the school wasn't actually there. It was just a hologram, and just they kind of really needed to go somewhere in order for the operation to work. And so basically the head teacher took them to not the school but the Cabinet of Souls, inside the cabinet, which also led to another thing that, oh yeah, it's bigger on the inside, just like the TARDIS. And so that almost like put me to mad, like, why are they in the Cabinet of Souls? I mean, why did they do that? Perhaps it was just something just to increase chances, and just the head teacher just said, way in theory, like that quote, that word, in theory. I completely just despised that word. I think it was okay for when she used it the first time and then the second time, but then when it got to the third, fourth and fifth time, I was completely just, stop saying that. I mean, she wanted everything to go according to plan, but initially it didn't go to plan at all. It just completely went, you know, out the window. Like, she had all of her notes that she needed to look at, and just like, they made no sense whatsoever. Just a waste of time, really. And just I think, not the waste of time for the whole, you know, episode, but just a waste of time for Rhino's notes to looking at it. I think that was just a waste of an act of where, you know, where she could have done something more useful instead of looking at her, you know, stupid notes, saying that everything could go according to plan. But no, it didn't go according to plan at all. It just went out the window, down the toilet, just completely useless. And then when the scene happened between Balin and Mrs. Quill, where they had that kind of almost fight scene, but then they were like talking about like, oh, I don't want to kill you. I mean, I've already saved your life. I don't want you to, you know, die yet again. And so they just don't want each other to die. But then they almost kind of had this kind of fight scene where one, you know, in one image, they want to fight and, you know, fight over the gun, and, you know, they want to kill the other person. Whereas in the other scene that they have, in the other anime, you know, imagination that they have, is that they always talk about like, I don't want to kill you, you know, you mean so much to me, and just like all that kind of you know, discussion about like, I just can't kill you because I've already saved your life, don't want to, you know, ruin your life yet again. And just, they always have the same meanings, like, I don't want to, you know, hurt you because you're the person who saved my life, and that sort of thing. And then it kind of got to the point where the fight scene really took toll, and they were all fighting over for the gun. But then Balin took up the gun, and then, you know, wanted to shoot Miss Quill because he wanted to see, you know, her niece again, because I think the kind of desire, they want to live in peace, of course. And so he was kind of like, homesick and just for my family. He wants to take the risk and go for it. But instead, Mrs. Quill was actually going to sacrifice herself for what really? I mean, she already had the thing out of her skull, but then initially she was going to die in the end. But no, instead, the gun actually backfired. Remember the first ever episode of Class? And if you remember that first ever scene where Quill gave the gun to a young stranger, and then completely the gun backfired and initially killed the stranger instead. And just that, the same thing happened to Balan again. It just completely backfired. And when he shot the gun, it completely shot him instead. It completely backfired, which meant that if actually Quill took the gun in the first place, she would initially kill herself. And so that was quite sneaky of the headmaster just to give Mrs. Quill her gun as a present. She was almost like trying to get rid of Mrs. Quill once and for all. I mean, how did she come to do that? And then that little scene where Mrs. Quill, kind of sentenced Balan to her grave and like kind of built a kind of memorial to Balan, and then kind of she left the Cabinet of Souls, and then she kind of talked to herself like, I am war itself, and then she kind of returned to the classroom, and then it kind of resumed from the 6th episode of Class, and then kind of went to the sudden ending that we all knew what was going to happen. But yes, kind of a very unusual story, but compared to most episodes, I kind of think that this don't be saying that like, what, why are you saying that this is like the worst episode there is in Class? But no, I'm not saying that. It's just I just don't feel like that this story, I mean, I knew what the ending was, I knew what was the starting was, but I think in episode 6 it was all really unexpected, whereas in episode 7 it was more unexpected than I thought than it was going to be. The middle bit was completely unexpected, but then the end, I just think that the end has a bit of a issue really. I mean, it could have been a different ending, could have been something else added on to the ending instead. I mean, I don't know, but I think the middle bit was the most intriguing part that I like about this episode. It was really brilliant. I think the quests, yet again, were a bit too short, but overall I think the dimensions, the settings were brilliant. I mean, Balan, yes again, his character is just the guy who played him. I mean, I don't know who actually played him, but he's just absolutely fantastic. He's brilliant. I just feel like that he's almost like the kind of a real soldier in my opinion. And Mrs. Quill yet again still has the same abilities as him, and they both share something in common. And as they're both soldiers and they both have been enslaved and been frozen, and so they do have a brilliant and unique relationship, and it's probably the first relationship that Mrs. Quill has probably had. Instead of kissing from a robot, she actually kissed a real human for once. And so yeah, I mean, there are some good points I love about this episode, and there are some bits which I kind of argue could have been improved on. So yeah, I mean, tell me your views on this episode. Did you like it? Did you think it was really good? I mean, please just comment down below and just tell me what your thoughts were on this episode. Anyway, please do give a like to this video, and also I will do the final episode of Class next week, which hopefully will be really good, and will involve Mrs. Quill, everybody else in there as well from the 6th episode, and so everybody will be involved in the final episode. But the Shadow King will be back, and I know that will be happening, but yeah, we'll see what happens. And so guys, thank you for watching for the 7th episode of Class, the review, and I hope you enjoyed the rest of your night. I'll see you soon next week, but I don't know when I'm going to do my Doctor Who marathon. I still haven't had those DVDs yet back from my friend. I really want to get this marathon over and done with, but we'll see what happens in the next couple of days. You never know, I may get one of the early one, maybe Unearthly Child, which I've got. I can always start that off, and then in probably next weekend, my friend will probably bring the DVDs back over, and then we'll be able to do this, Doctor Who marathon as soon as possible. But anyway guys, I hope you've enjoyed this Class review. Definitely has been one interesting episode today. And so guys, thank you for watching, leave a like, and so yes again, I'm keep repeating myself because it's kind of like my habit. Whenever I finish off a story, I kind of add something extra and then suddenly say the same things over again. It's just kind of the habit where you have that kind of thing. Anyway, my head's starting to hurt. Perhaps I have an iron in my skull that I would need to get out. Perhaps I need an operation. Thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you next week. Enjoy the rest of your night.